Dynamic pricing is back in the discourse, partly because the New York Times recently released one of its opinion YouTube videos in which it looked at the history and potential future of the concept. And yet, this is an idea and debate which has been being had pretty consistently for the past 5 years, if not much longer. Perhaps previously it was just known as airline pricing, but discussions around dynamic pricing fascinate me because it's something that we absolutely hate that theoretically we kind of shouldn't. Let me explain. See, the main reasons that this New York Times video give for disliking dynamic pricing are the potentially illegal uses of it. Things like algorithmic price fixing, where different companies using the same dynamic pricing systems end up doing price fixing because the algorithm is helping them both boost their prices using the collective knowledge it has of both. It also talks about the use of data harvesting as a means to raise prices for different people in different ways. But what's interesting to my mind about all these conversations surrounding dynamic pricing is how much we hate it even when it is being used in ways which absolutely aren't illegal and viewed through the kind of austere lens of the economist absolutely aren't even immoral. We just really hate the concept. Take, for example, Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster came under a lot of criticism back 1 summer ago, when tickets went on sale for Oasis. There was allegations which the company has denied that they used dynamic pricing. My assessment of the situation is that they did use kind of dynamic pricing in the broadest possible sense in the term, but they didn't use algorithmic dynamic pricing. I guess the distinction being that dynamic pricing in a slightly more broader sense is a person going, let's bump the price up, let's put the price down. Whereas with an algorithm, it's just kind of being automated. And when it comes to a concert, we actually end up with a model where we would be able to see if the company were setting prices too high, because we would end up with an empty stadium. In the most kind of abstract, classic economic model of supply and demand, we know that the price was at least as low as it needed to be to sell all the tickets because Oasis sold out. And in fact, the use of dynamic pricing in relation to concert tickets is often viewed by whether it's Ticketmaster or whether it's promoters as a means of combating something else that we generally all don't like, which is ticket touts. Right? The idea is that if you sell the tickets too cheaply, that ticket touts will buy them up, and then they will be the ones that will effectively be doing dynamic pricing, but maybe outside the concert or online. And therefore, that money that, I guess if we're going to spend a lot of money, we're probably hoping that it does go to Oasis or Taylor Swift or whoever is working hard to make the show happen, will actually be going to someone who was just buying the ticket just to try and make some money on the markup. And so companies like Ticketmaster view dynamic pricing as a way to get around that, right? The ticket still ends up being the price that a ticket tout would have sold it for, because else it won't sell. They simply get the money rather than it going to someone who was just buying a shed load of Oasis tickets on the hope of being able to sell them outside the concert the day before. But what always fascinates me is that, yes, with Oasis, we know that they weren't pricing tickets too high, because if they had been, the Oasis concert would be half empty. And yet, we still kind of just have this visceral dislike for any kind of system where we go in without really knowing how the prices are going to move. And I think ultimately, we just really don't like to come too face to face with supply and demand. See, dynamic pricing at its heart is simply a way of automating supply and demand, right? Rather than me phoning up Ticketmaster and haggling for an Oasis ticket and them saying, no, we think we can get more for it. Me going, oh, I don't think you can. I would like you to sell it to me slightly cheaper. A computer does that for us and really tests us to see how much we and everyone else might be willing to pay. Which, interestingly, the amount we are actually willing to pay is often different to the amount that we might say that we are willing to pay. And sometimes when something is too expensive, economists would say that this is supply and demand doing its work of really making us make those choices. I was actually talking to a friend who did go to see Oasis, who said something along the lines of, I would have been willing to pay £200 to see Oasis. And another friend saying, but you didn't pay £200, you paid £350 or whatever it was. Like, it was really expensive. And any kind of haggling, but particularly in the dynamic pricing model, the pursuit of the right price in the eyes of economists is to really test, not only what would we say that we want to pay, what are we actually willing to pay? And in that case, it isn't £200, it is £350 because, that is proved by the fact that my friend paid that money to go. And I think we're all broadly aware that supply and demand is kind of changing the prices of the things that we buy somewhere slightly off stage, right? We know that we go to the supermarket and gradually prices shift. Usually they go up, occasionally down, but mostly up. And yet there's something about, I think, both the speed of the price changes, but also the personalization and the lack of pre-awareness about what the price of something might be that really seems to offend something in us in terms of how we would like to exist in the world and how to exist in an economy, right? And I think the first one is stability. We all kind of understand that supply and demand does its thing somewhere in the background, and that the prices of various things we buy, it gradually goes up over time, sometimes down, mostly up. However, I think we kind of like it when that doesn't happen too much. And I think even sometimes we are willing to pay a little bit extra, even if that might be paying slightly over the odds, rather than to have that sense that something might suddenly go down and suddenly go up, and we might get a great deal yesterday and there's a day. Like, I think the broad, coming into terms with that too quickly just becomes such a hectic life experience that, yes, it might be fantastic in a sort of abstract economic world, but in a real world that is kind of makes for a horrible existence. I think there is also something that is moderately egalitarian in the most limited possible way of a definition of that term, to a world in which we kind of like the idea that everything costs broadly the same for each person in the world. I know I'm never going to buy a super yacht. I mean, I don't particularly want to buy a super yacht, but there is something slightly more egalitarian about a world in which, yes, Bill Gates might buy a super yacht, but you might not. But you know that the amount of capitalism points that you need to unlock the super yacht is the same that he does. If you live in a world where maybe actually he gets it slightly cheaper, or you don't quite know what the rules are around how much the thing should cost, that is suddenly the game feels more rigged than it did before. We can kind of get our head around the first model, but the second model becomes slightly more, it seems even more of a fix. And I think finally, we just don't really like haggling as much as it's kind of implied that we should. I don't think we like the idea that not only do you have to have a certain amount of money to buy things, but that you have to be good at buying things kind of seems like this odd indignity. I'm always aware that all of the places left in modern life where you have to haggle, we broadly view as disreputable, right? So estate agents, where you might have to haggle for rent or for a house price, we don't really like them. Marketplaces, right? Or car boot sales, where you go to buy stuff and you're likely to have to haggle for goods. Even eBay kind of gets a bit of a bad rep. Maybe high-end auction houses get a bit of a pass, but most places in the world where we still have to haggle, we kind of view as a bit suspect. Like the act of having to negotiate a price rather than a shop or vendor of whatever description being willing to go, no, this is my product and this is my price and I will stand by that. We kind of trust that. And so in that video, they talk about this kind of one price model, which in the tale of dynamic pricing often gets talked about as though it's a reasonably recent invention from some Quakers in the US in the 1800s. In reality, there has been loads of times throughout history where prices have been fixed for certain goods, right? The price of bread in England was fixed for a very, very long time because it was felt important that people had that stability of a price of bread. And so, yes, there are all of these challenges with dynamic pricing in terms of the use of data, in terms of potential for price fixing, various ways in which it could and should be illegal. And yet I'm always interested in how much it reveals about how much we dislike aspects of our economic system which are held to be quite central. But let me know what you think down in the comments. And if you liked this weird little slightly rambly video to camera, then let me know as well. As I said in the last one of these that we put out, if we have put out another one, we used to do kind of clips from a live stream that I used to do on this channel. And one thing I always found was that far more people watched the videos in clip form than actually watched the live stream when I did it. And so we're trying out a slightly new thing. We're calling them dead streams, where I sort of do a live stream without having to go live in front of people, embarrassingly, on the internet, and just chat at the camera for a bit. And we try and kind of make a slightly more casual format of video in which I can kind of respond slightly more quickly to the events of the week and to the things that are in the public conversation. And so if you're enjoying this, let me know. I would also be super grateful if you would consider supporting my team and I's work over at patreon.com/Tom Nicholas. Making videos for the internet is getting more and more difficult as time goes on. We're trying to adapt a little bit to an era of vertical video and short form video, alongside wanting to make really in-depth, rich, rewarding documentary style stuff for YouTube. So I would be super grateful if you would consider supporting us in doing that over patreon.com/Tom Nicholas. But if you've enjoyed this, let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.